Hi crafty fans, welcome back. It's Sandy here. Hope you're having a great week. Today we are going to play with some turnabouts from Concord and Ninth. I've been having a ton of fun with these things, so I hope you'll play along with me. I'm playing with the Butterfly Love Turnabout, and you get this little jig along with the stamp. If you bought your stamps before January of this year, then you also need to create an alignment aid. And I'm going to quickly show you how to do this. I used a piece of clear plastic, and you'll see that I got it here. It's for overhead projectors, and I cut it 6 by 6, and then I used a grid paper, and I did my lines corner to corner so that I have my middle section all marked off. And use a Sharpie for this because it's permanent, so it won't rub off very easily. You also need to number each of the corners because this is what the turnabout is about. We're going to be turning the cardstock that we are stamping on. And so the second part are these little arrows that I have here, and these are the sizes of the 3 card fronts that I use most often. And so I created this little jig out of vellum, and I lined up my center, and then I took that Sharpie again and I went around the outside corner of each one, and that made my alignment aid for each one of the sizes of card fronts that I like to use. And I think this one is 4 by 5 1/4. For my example today, we're going to be using the biggest one, the 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. And you'll see that I'm now writing the 3 sizes that I have on these alignments so that you know what I'm talking about. So these are handy to have. Concord and Ninth, since January, now sells them. So when you place an order, don't forget to get your alignment aid, and your jig will come with your stamp set. To get it set up for the stamping, you need a Misti, and what we're going to do is we're going to open it, and I've got the 6 by 8 Misti, and most of the templates that come are 6 by 6, but they do have some for the smaller Misti as well. So we are going to take our template and we are going to lay it in on the side that you're stamping on the left hand side, and I'm just putting a piece of cardstock in there so that you can see my template, my jig. So this is the jig that lines up the stamp. So take your stamp off of your plastic, and it's usually in kind of an L shape, so it's a bit hard to get off of there. Just be gentle with it. You don't want to tear it. And you're going to lay it down and line up the butterflies with the jig. And so it's just taking a couple minutes here to do that. And I'm not going to speed this up because this is really important. The setup is super important so that you get really good results when you start stamping. And so I've got the stamp side face down. I'm going to close the arm on my Misti and push it so that the stamp sticks to it, and the jig sticks to it obviously as well, so you need to peel that off so that you can add ink to your stamp. So you're done with that, you can set it aside, and now I'm going to bring in my alignment aid that I just showed you how I made, and I'm going to start with the number 1 in the top right hand corner, and I'm just popping a piece of white paper down in there so that you can see my jig. I don't normally have anything in there, so I just I can see it, but it's hard to see it on the camera. So line up number 1 and then add your cardstock. You want to use a little bit of removable adhesive on the back of your cardstock, and so I think I'm using Tombow. And then make sure that your alignment aid is secure down in the bottom left hand corner of your Misti, and then attach your cardstock to it. And then rub it so it's going to stick, and there you go, you're ready to start inking. I'm going tone on tone, so I'm using Gina Blue Lagoon ink and cardstock. They match, obviously. And I'm going to ink up the stamp over on the right-hand side. And then I'm going to close the arm, and the image will transfer onto my cardstock. Next, I'm going to pick up my alignment aid and turn it to the right so that 2 is in the top right hand corner. And again, you want to secure that bottom left hand corner, make sure it's good and tight in the corner of the Misti, and you're going to ink the stamp again. And this is the fun part about going tone on tone. You don't have to clean that every time to change colors. and stamping it again. And that's number 2. And you see the 2 cards that were at the beginning. That was just at this stage, I only used 2 colors, and that's how you get those ones. So here's the cards I'm talking about. See how I did blue and green? So, and then the one on the right is black and blue. So I just did 2 steps. I cleaned the stamps in between each one before I changed the color. But this time we're going to turn again, and we got number 3 in the top right hand corner, and we are going to ink again, and we are going to stamp again. And these are meant to go 4 times. The 4th time we're going to do some heat embossing. We're done with the colored ink, so I'm going to clean the stamp off, and then I'm going to turn my alignment aid to number 4 right after I heat set it. And so keep the heat tool a bit far away from the paper and the plastic. It may warp your plastic a little bit, but you want to mostly dry it, not completely. This is where I'm going to break the embossing rule. I want a little bit of ink still wet on that last stamped image that I did. So I'm popping it back in. As I said, I'm making sure that number 4 is at the top. A little problem when you heat set, it will loosen up your tape. So I'm taking the opportunity to clean any of the extra ink off, and I'm realigning my piece back on there. And then I'm going to use my anti-static and get rid of all my fingerprints. And now we're ready to stamp. Well, as soon as I get this done, okay, I'm using gold embossing powder. I'm getting that ready, and I'm going to use my Versamark ink to stamp this last one. So I'm inking up the stamp again, and then I'm going to close the hand, the arm, press, make sure you have a good stamped image, and then I'm going to pull off the cardstock, and I'm going to cover it with the gold embossing powder, and you're going to see that the gold not only sticks to that last one, but it's also sticking a tiny little bit to some of the ink that was left over and wet from the previous stamping. So now you want to take your heat tool and heat emboss the entire thing, get it good and warm, and make sure that all of that sticky little embossing powder is all stuck there. And see how this gives you that kind of funky distress look on the embossing. I really like that. And it's kind of shiny when you turn it just like that. I used the Butterfly Love dies and the stitched circle dies to cut out the rest of the embellishments for my card. And I am going to heat emboss the sentiment onto the top right side of this little circle. And I did this one in black. I heat embossed it because this surface is very shiny. It's the mirror cardstock from Tonic. And so it's hard to stamp black ink on it as it doesn't dry very well. So heat embossing is a good idea. That way you won't smear it. And so I'm just heating it up there to get it good and dry. Next, I've got a A2 card, so it's 4 1/4 by 11. I'm scoring and folding it at 5 1/2, and I like to use my Scor-BUDDY when I do this because it keeps my cards square for me. So now we're going to take the piece that we stamped and embossed, and we are going to secure it to the front of the card. So I'm just adding some adhesive and deciding where I'm going to put my sentiment, some spot that doesn't have a whole bunch of gold, and just popping that together. And let's get some foam tape out. I used the foam tape on the back of all of my embellishments that just to add a little bit of height and to move them up a little bit from that busy, pretty background that we just created. So I'm just working my way through attaching them all. And I used a glue dot on the left side of that butterfly so that it was flush. And then these 3 little gold guys, they're the final embellishment. And I'm just kind of finding spots where there is no gold and adding them to it. So that's my turnabout share for today. I hope you enjoyed it. I have listed all of the products in a link underneath this video, and there's also a free PDF over on my blog. There's a link there for that as well, just to help you out. You could use one of these butterflies for the inside of your card. That would be kind of pretty. And I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, please consider giving me a thumbs up. I'd appreciate that very much. And until next time, toodles!